All right, so welcome. We are here to talk about asking for love. It's a topic that seems simple, but is quite complicated. And I brought two experts today.
Experts.
Yeah, experts. They understand love, they give really good love, and they create love. So I want to talk to them about specifically their projects and then how they define love and see themselves in the world of love. So I want you guys to introduce yourself first.
I'm Eric Rogers. I am an academic and I guess an activist. I live currently in Cambridge, England, where I'm doing a PhD in history, but I also frequent San Francisco, where I have deep sort of communal roots, and here I work on a lot of sort of communal projects relating to sex, love, desire, and questions of hedonism and how to engage in hedonism ethically.
My name's Zarinah. I'm from England, but I live in San Francisco. I live at a commune known as the Embassy. I'm also an academic. I'm a scientist by day, but I also spend a lot of time thinking about how we connect with each other as the source of a lot of our problems, or how we don't connect with each other as the source of a lot of our problems. And for me, this is a really important, necessary, and perhaps not sufficient, but necessary part of changing our trajectory as a species. Quite
Yeah. All right, so the first question I have for you guys, you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
What is love?
Do you think there's a biological
I knew you were gonna say
basis
that.
of love? I focus a lot on the social construction of love. That is what it means to us as a concept, culturally speaking. But do you think there's a biological basis of that?
I think love is many things. I think we have a very sort of poor concept around it. There are certainly some people who believe that there are biological forms of love, like Helen Fisher has a theory of love, an evolutionary theory of love, where they talk about these sort of different kinds of love. And of course the Greeks had their own ideas about like the different kinds of love that you can have. I think I tend to agree with you that the thing that is probably the most relevant to us is how we socially construct love. I saw this really wonderful question posed online recently, which was somebody who was, I guess, studying a fiction course, and one of their professors posed the question to them: what would love look like if we didn't have the term falling in love, if that wasn't a thing that we thought about? Like, how many ways are we preventing ourselves from relating to each other because we have this idea of what falling in love is? And would we even fall in love in the same way? And I think that's really unclear. There are anthropological studies looking at the sort of universalism of love, and they do tend to find this sort of pair bond as something that exists across many places in the world. But I think that's an open question.
Yeah, I suppose my way into the question would be to sort of problematize what we mean by love, because you might mean a different thing than how I think of love. So first of all, there's like the translatability of the concept, and then there's the question of like what the underlying thing that we're trying to describe is, and whether that's a thing that's consistent across cultures and across time. From doing a bit of historical research, it seems like it's not very consistent across cultures and not very consistent across time. I think it's also worth distinguishing between different types of love. So there's amorous love, there's sort of like the love of friendship, there's sort of familial love. I think there's lots of instances where those types of love are sort of get blurred, and the boundaries between them get blurred, or you might fall in multiple categories or have people that you associate those feelings with on multiple levels. I don't know that they all get the same amount of attention. It seems like we're in a culture that is really, really interested in amorous love specifically. It tends to find its way into almost all of our movies, almost all of our television, almost all of our songs. It's also extremely profitable. So there are authors who've written, a book comes to mind called Consuming the Romantic Utopia, about the profitability of the sort of amorous love narrative in sort of a consumer capitalism in the 20th century. So, I mean, there's a lot of vested interest in our obsession with romantic love. The culture industry constantly churns out love stories, and they make tons of money doing so because it's just so appealing to people. And at a certain point, I think it just starts to have a ton of momentum. So you can embed just about any narrative in a culture this deeply. You just can press that button again and again and again. It's like gender too. You just push that gender button again and again, and people are going to love it because they can relate to it. It's just such a deeply ingrained part of our culture. But one of the things that Zarinah and I'd like to explore is like the limitations of that narrative and that emphasis, that there are these other types of love that tend to be de-emphasized. And I think actually to the detriment of a lot of people who maybe don't have access to that type of amorous love, people who, for one reason or another, don't find people interesting in that way, or for one reason or another feel or are treated as sort of undateable, or people who need more than one person. People who have needs that can't be met by one person. There's a lot of reasons why at least the traditional version of amorous love and that narrative can be quite limiting, and then it becomes a political question, I think it's
also worth pointing out that our sort of fixation on a certain very specific kind of love not only tends to block us from seeing other kinds of solidarity and kinship and love, but it also can be really harmful in and of itself. And I think the kind of eros, or like in loveness that we are really socially reinforcing right now, is very addictive. It has like a lot of parallels to addiction, and actually makes a lot of people really, really unhappy. And it's not just that it's preventing them from getting their other needs met, but actually causes them to be stuck in a cycle of like pain, and that's really important, I think, to block.
Yeah, I'd imagine most people can probably see people in their lives at any given moment who are lovesick, who either are unsustainably participating in a romantic relationship, or pining after somebody, or are brokenhearted because some romantic relationship has ended, or torn up about whether or not they should end a romantic relationship, perhaps because they have feelings for someone else, or they have to move somewhere, or they have different goals or aspirations that don't line up with the relationship. So it's interesting to sort of look at it alongside other sort of pathologized conditions like addiction, like, I don't know, behavioral problems. I mean, there are consequences.
That's a good question. So is love an addiction?
I think love can certainly be an addiction, and I think there's a bunch of people who probably agree with you. I don't think it has to be, but I mean, I think ultimately we could probably become dependent on anything, on most things that are rewarding. And for some people it seems certainly the case.
Yeah. It seems like, at least for some people, it is. There's also, I'm really interested in like bringing these kinds of questions to the social level. Like maybe love is an addiction for our culture. Maybe our culture is addicted to love in a way that's unsustainable. But I think you only have to look at the lyrics of popular songs through the last few decades to perhaps arrive at the conclusion that it is an addiction, at least for a lot of people.
Yeah.